Go.
The second interesting point about Purwokerto is these three guys from the United Nations Commission for Indonesia, and they became our constant companions. Fergus Fay was the American, and we had received from the company a kerosene stove. Well, he whipped open the box, quickly set up that kerosene stove for me, and I never saw the instructions, never. So I never knew what to do with it. A kerosene stove, the ones we had anyway, had the wick a full foot underneath the flame. And the way you controlled the flame was by turning the wick up or down, but I didn't know anything about that. And I didn't know that you had to clean the wicks regularly so that the flame would be nice and steady. So that was all in my future. But on that stove which she set up, and in that Christmas, 1952, he cooked a goose, and it was the best goose I have ever eaten. So we had goose for dinner on Christmas Eve. They featured later in my life, Fergus Fay had a mantra. He loved to say, an hour too late and a dollar too short. Fergus Fay disappeared from our life, but the Belgian offered us a home to stay with his parents on the Italian Riviera when we were on home leave, and we spent several nights with his family. This beautiful, beautiful home on the Italian Riviera. I know I said he was Belgian, and that's what I remember. But why were we on the Italian Riviera? And I don't remember.
Because the coastline is much nicer than the Belgian coastline.
Yes, I think that's very true, Rob. Anyway, the other man, the Australian, one year when the children were 10, 8, 10, 6, 4, and 2, we went to Australia on vacation, and they were very hospitable. He and his wife were very hospitable to us. From Purwokerto, we were sent next for another very brief period to Bandung. Bandung was a city, a town up in the mountains. It was north of the capital, Batavia, and it was cool. It was a respite from the heat. People loved to live in Bandung because they could escape the endless, persistent heat and rainstorms. And so we were there very fortunately for, again, very briefly, 5 months, but that finished out our tour. And it was in Bandung that I had another spurt of piano. I had a wonderful piano teacher there for a brief period and really made great strides. But of course it was too late in my life to really accomplish anything. And then with frequent moves, and I did get back to it briefly in Surabaya when I had a 2-piano partner, and we played a couple of 2 piano pieces together. We weren't bad. I didn't realize it until later that once upon a time, I really could play the piano. But anyway, that's in the future, all of that. And so we went on our first home leave, which was 6 months traveling through Europe, going to Italy, where I determined I was going to live for the rest of my life. Italy, it was so beautiful. We went to Italy, Switzerland, France, England, and New York. And to me, they were all tourist places. A wonderful, wonderful trip. And then back to home leave with the parents.
And were
in
they living
Palo
in
Alto.
Palo Alto?
And
Okay.
we always stayed with our families when we came home. We would divide our time between the Stricks, who were at 555 Center Drive, and the Bubs, who were at 531 Center Drive, with one house in between.
And did the Bubs and the Stricks, who lived in Palo Alto, your parents, did they get along?
They did for a while. There was a falling out later on, which wasn't my mother's fault, but nevertheless it was a falling out. If you turn that off, I'll tell you what happened.
Oh, go ahead and let's put it on film.
Okay. So we returned to Java after a very long extended home leave because Harry had had 3 months of additional training, so that extended our home leave to 6 months. And we returned to Java in I think I've got a picture. I really do. I think I have a picture of us, yes. Returning to Java August 31st, 1953. And there are pictures of us, if you want to get these.
And Edie's born.
Yeah, so Edie had already been born.
And here is, Edie was born. Oh no, then this wasn't the first time we returned. It had to be the second time. This is wrong. You have to edit that out.
Okay.
We returned to Java. No, I wasn't pregnant yet. We returned to Java, and I know the time we left. We returned to Java after our 6 months home leave in January 1950, and we stopped in Hawaii for 2 nights, and we were supposed to go from Hawaii to Shanghai, but this was 1950, and Chiang Kai-shek had fled the country, and Mao Zedong had shut the doors of China to all Westerners. So Harry could not return to Shanghai to show me the Chinese American school where he had gone to school as a young boy.
And by the way, were you traveling by airplane or ship?
We were traveling by the SS Wilson,
Okay.
as I recall. They were all the president ships that plowed that Pacific route. Having to bypass Shanghai, we went next to Japan, and we were there 2 nights, and we had one memorable experience going to see, we landed in Yokohama. We docked in Yokohama, I should say. It was a ship. We docked in Yokohama, and we went to see the famous Kamakura Buddha. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Yeah. And then we sailed from there to Hong Kong. And Hong Kong was the last outpost of civilization before we went back to Indonesia. Indonesia was always considered a hardship post because it had nothing. You lived off the land. But in Hong Kong, you could get all these wonderful Western goodies and all these beautiful Chinese artifacts and things like that. So we went to, did our last minute shopping, and then if I recall, Harry flew on ahead to Makassar in Sulawesi, where we were next to be stationed, and I followed by ship. In Hong Kong, I realized that I was expecting a baby. So that was going to be very exciting. The first week in Makassar was not auspicious. I am sure it rained 10 inches in one 24-hour period.
Wow.
And everything was truly, truly humid and and mildewed and soggy, and it was just oppressive.
Where was Makassar?
Makassar is in Sulawesi.
Sulawesi.
It was then the Celebes, but now it's Sulawesi.
Okay.
And it's the capital of Sulawesi. So it's the big prominent town.
Okay.
There was a Dutch contingent of soldiers who did not stay very long. Independence was still to come. Independence came in August of 1950. I have to do a bit of history here. In 1945, when the Second World War was over, the Javanese expected independence from the Netherlands East Indies. They had fought the Japanese, they expected independence right away. It was not granted to them. The Dutch, just like the French and the British, thought they were going to reclaim their colonies right away. Just the Dutch were going to go back to Netherlands Indies, and the British were going to go back to Malaya and India and all the rest of it, and the French were going back to French Indochina. As we know, none of that worked out. But in Makassar, there were this Dutch contingent of soldiers had been sent there to put down a mini rebellion. It was a rebellion not between the Dutch and the Javanese, but between the people of Sulawesi and the people of Java. Because the people of Sulawesi and also Sumatra, they had their own ideas. They didn't want to be part of Java. They would like to be themselves. Just like Bosnia and Serbia, and they eventually all got their little bits of sovereignty. Well, this is what they wanted to do with Indonesia, break it up. But Sukarno, that dictator in Java, said, no, the Netherlands East Indies is now going to become the Indonesian archipelago, and I claim every bit of land in every island that once was part of the Netherlands East Indies. So back to the Dutch contingent being there. The fact that it was important to me was I saw a Dutch doctor. And for the first and only time during my pregnancy, I saw a doctor. And we eventually survived for about 5 months. I getting more and more or less used to this place that I really did not like living in. The very few friends, living in this great big company house with other company people. An enormous piece of property, no close neighbors, no transportation, no opportunity to go any place or do anything. It was very hard for the housewives. But there became one of these uprisings. And after a while, that it didn't seem to be ceasing anytime quickly. So it was decided that I should leave because it wasn't really safe. And I was put on a little coastal steamer and sent to Surabaya for a couple of weeks until things calmed down. So I got on this little coastal steamer, and it was an overnight to Surabaya. Somebody from the company met me, and they took me to a little hotel in downtown Surabaya where I spent a month. And I just remember sitting out on a little porch all by myself. What on earth did I do all those days and hours? I don't remember. But eventually it was deemed safe, and I went back to Makassar. And so it was for another 3 or 4 months until there was another bout of firing, another burst of gunfire and of forces clashing, and this time it was much closer to our house and much more dangerous. And again, I was evacuated. I was sent to the ships, to the docks to board another little ship to go again to Surabaya. And this time I was taken in a United Nations Jeep, and they were white. And the United Nations white Jeep seemed to tell everyone that they were protected. Do not attack us. And indeed, I got there to the docks safely. I got to Surabaya safely. Once again, I was met by the company, but this time it was a new manager, and I was taken to stay in the big company house with an American manager and his Australian wife, and they were delightful people. And the Australian wife and I became very good friends. I was there one night with them. The next day I went and visited a doctor, a Dutch doctor. He was enormous. And then that night at dinner, this is the second day I'm there in Surabaya, I was sitting at dinner, and I had strong indications that my baby was coming. So I was rushed to the hospital. And this is about 9 o'clock at night. And I was visited by nurses off and on. Was I all right? Was everything fine? And I was saying yes, yes, yes. And then about 2 a.m., I suddenly realized, I've been having contractions, but they weren't very severe. And about 2 a.m., it occurred to me that that baby was being born. And she was. I called the nurse. I said, I think the baby's coming. They called the doctor. Well, he got there just in time. Just in time. In fact, they might even have held back that birth by about 2 or 3 minutes. But it didn't do any harm. You know, if you hold back a birth, the child suffocates in the canal. Fortunately, that didn't happen. So the baby was born at 3 a.m. 6 hours later. First birth. The first of 5 very easy births.
And so that was Edie's
That
arrival.
was Edie. And Harry got the news. Wife gave birth to daughter, 3 a.m. All well. Yeah. And so at that point, they transferred Harry and he came to Surabaya. And we started life in Surabaya for the second time with a new baby. And this time life in Surabaya was much different because on our first day there had been very, very few Americans. We were almost the only American couple. Now, however, it was 2.5 years later, lots of international companies had sent their representatives back to Surabaya. There were a number of young mothers with babies. It was a very, very friendly, social, happy time. Lots of parties, lots of rice staffels in the middle of the day on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays, excursions.
A
rice staffel means a rice table. And this is actually it was a Dutch appropriation of Indonesian food. Rice is the basis, and on top of the rice, you put all sorts of spicy foods, spicy meats, spicy vegetables, spicy bananas, chopped nuts, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
A real treat, a really good rice staffel is a great treat. And this was our second tour in Surabaya, which lasted until Edie was she'd been born in September. She was walking. She was about 12 months, 13 months old. I think it was that. We went to Palembang. We were sent to Palembang in Sumatra. Now that's Palembang.
So here's pictures of.
When did we go? Wait a minute. I have to start and think. When did we go to?
You turn it off, Rob. Turn it off.